Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Austin Product and AI SIG for May. It is May 29th, and we have Matt Shanahan with us today, talking about the new org chart for AI product development. That's very exciting to have him here. He's got a couple of decades of product platform strategy teams. You can see some of my notes at the bottom. Matt and I have known each other here in Seattle past couple of years. Seen lots of change over the years, and we're very lucky to have him here to talk about specifically the new org chart for AI product development. Just a little bit about Agile Austin before I throw it over to Matt. This is the mission of Agile Austin. As you can see, we've got a lot of folks that are not in Austin, Texas, and we have people from all over the world. After COVID, this whole group shifted quite a bit to Zoom only, with some in-person events. But we continue to run all sorts of great events around the world. We have a board of directors, and there's actually voting going on. So if you're a member, there is a slate of candidates, and there's lots of board seats that you can opt into if you'd like to. Several of us in this room have sat on the board before. It's a wonderful experience and a great organization. A couple of other things about Agile Austin. We have sponsorship opportunities. And you can see there, we'll talk about our sponsors in a moment. There's a membership. Membership gives you the ability to vote. But a lot of this, most of the stuff, nearly everything Agile Austin does is free. So feel free to join if you'd like. Speaking of what Agile Austin does, there are 6 regular meetups right now: coaching, Agile at Scale, book club, product and AI, which is where you are today, leaders in lean Kanban. We have Ben Rogers here today, who is, I believe, the leader of Agile at Scale, in addition to being our CTO. We have a couple of sponsors we always like to say thank you to because even though it's free, it still costs money for Zoom and a few other things. So thank you, Agile Velocity, for being a platinum sponsor for many, many, many years. And ResumeX just joined us, I think, last year as a gold sponsor. And Admiral Laureate Coaching has been around for a long time as a sponsor as well. Thank you to all of you for helping us out. If you are a member, one of the benefits is a professional development scholarship. Please reach out to Vishal or I if you have questions about that. Um, if you are here today, Agile Austin and Agile Velocity has a code for a savings on training, so take a look at that. And if you're interested in volunteering, like Vishal and I are, as part of this SIG, please feel free to do so. It is open to everyone. You don't have to be on the board. You can just do a thing. You don't need permission. It's good to reach out. So just a little bit about Vishal and I. We've been around Agile Austin. Next year, it'll be 20 years for both of us. Hard to believe. Starting in Austin. Now we are all over the place. I'm in Seattle. Vishal, I think, still in Austin. Upcoming events. We have, oh, I spelled Ash's name incorrectly there. Let me just make sure I got this right. There you go. Ash, the author of all sorts of great books and models for starting lean, like startups and defining minimum viable products, lean canvas, all those things. Ash has been a constant Agile Austin friend for decades at this point. He's going to be talking about the Vibe framework for the AI era. We have our always popular August lightning talks, and July is open. So if there's something you'd like to share and what you've learned, please reach out. So here we are today for talking about the new org chart for AI product development. I'll let you read it. This is what Matt is going to be talking about today and going to be leading us through. And with that, I will hand it over to Matt.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Just stop sharing here. How do I stop sharing? You can probably just take it over, Matt. Oh, there's my button.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Matt. You can see the screen, hopefully.
Yep, looks good.
So we'll go into, kind of why is framing an AI through an org chart really a key to success. So hopefully that'll be the takeaway. This presentation really is about AI in operation, so it has nothing to do about how you use AI in a product. So quickly about me, Matt gave a little bit of an intro. I've been in the software industry for over 30 years, both in product and marketing roles. I'm reasonably technical. I got a graduate degree in computer engineering, so I know how to spell computers. I've had multiple successful exits. I've been involved with large corporations, startups, etc. And I'm also really deeply interested and curious about transformational changes. So that's what we'll go into. And that's why I decided to build what I call investmentlab.ai. My goal in it was to explore and document the boundary between humans and AI in product development. So hopefully I can share a little bit about what we've learned over the last couple of months. Here would be my, if you don't stay till the end, here's the takeaways that I would hope you'd have. A successful AI requires an organizational design. I'll go through why that's true. Specifically, when you think about it, there's kind of the steps of creating an org chart and then placing AI roles directly into that org chart. Each of those AI roles needs a job specification, so detailed job description, along with the RACI, responsibilities, accountability, contribution, models. And what I would argue also is it needs a salary. What is the salary you're willing to pay for that AI job? There's a lot of talk about it and there's no return on investment. Well, if you give it a job and you know what you're willing to pay for it, you get a return on investment. There also needs to be human roles. If you create these new AI roles, what are the human roles? And you got to rewrite those. And how do you do that? That became one of my questions. It's like, what are those two roles and what's that boundary? And then obviously there's a knock-on effect to the process flows that go into it, the tooling of that process, and ultimately, what decisions are you willing to let the AI make versus the decisions that the humans have to make and get that separation just right. So that's really, what I would say is the takeaway for anybody on this call is this is the activity that you would need to do to fully implement an AI model. So as I mentioned, my objective was to explore the boundary between humans and AI in product development. And I've been trying to do this already. So at a previous organization, 3 years ago when ChatGPT came out, we all started experimenting. Hey, you got to use it, et cetera. And everybody started using it, but the technology kept advancing pretty quickly, right? From where we were 3 years ago to where we are now, it's accelerating. It's continuing to accelerate. But during that 3-year period, everybody kept talking about, oh, just experiment. You were trying to do it within the frame. We were trying to do it within our current people, process, and technology. And, we did hackathons. We got together and talked about it. Everybody got individual OKRs as well as group OKRs. We did experimentation. There were all these things. And, many of you have probably done these moves. Some people are still doing it. But what I found is just thinking about it over and over, it's all still within the same org process and tools. And that's really not going to scale. And here's why. Here's the too familiar story. This came out just this week, where Uber's saying it's getting harder to justify the money. And there's tons of articles coming out this way. I mean, this is not novel or new that I'm showing, but I think it's the absence of what we're seeing in the media that's interesting. We're not seeing any articles about how organizations have transformed themselves. Like, what is the new org structure? What are the roles that got automated specifically? What do humans do now versus AI? Nobody's actually talking about that. And the more I researched into it, the less you find on it. Now, people are saying it's happening, and I do believe that's true. So that wave will come, but it hasn't come yet. And so that's really where everybody is trying to figure it out, just like me, just trying to figure out, how do I make this happen? And the reason I started to think about it is it harkened me back to a time in my career where I had to make the jump from on-premises. Yes, I was an on-premises guy. And, I came from a model where we shipped CDs and we thought FTP downloads was a remarkable innovation. And then SaaS came along and there were companies that made the jump and there were companies that didn't. I mean, I really like Concur Technologies. completely on-prem SaaS company, became the leading SaaS, expense management company at the time, and had an amazing exit. But they took on the new model. They took huge hits in the marketplace on their valuation. The analysts hated them. They really took it down, but they changed all their internal processes, all their revenue models and everything else, and came out the other side. We're going to see the same thing as it translates into traditional to AI native. Now, the reason I bring up the past is I made that jump too. I left a software company that was on-prem and joined a SaaS startup. And I was able to learn by learning around people who had done it before. So I could really ramp and become experienced in a model that's lasted for 20 years. So, that experience gave me a 20-year run in SaaS. But I knew that experience wasn't going to translate into AI. So I wanted to do it again. And that's why I'm building what I'm building. And I do believe that successful teams are going to rebuild their operating models. The future requires, the same thing as the past did, to think about how you build your products, how you ship them, how you conceive of them, how you deliver and monetize. So here's what I'm building. My inspiration, just as a backstory, every year I run something called the Family Investment Club, and I'm the organizer of that club. It includes kind of my children, their spouses, and everything else in the middle of that. And the way it works is we get together at the start of the year. Everybody picks a set of securities, a goal, a rationale, a time frame, like what are you trying to achieve and what time frame. And then we get together, mid-year for dinner, and we discuss what's happening. And I keep track of all of it. So everyone gets to see a summary of everybody else's experiments. And then at the end of the year, we assess and we kind of rank against the rationale that you put in versus what actually happened from the 10Ks, 10Qs, et cetera. And the goal is to learn something, take away, and how does that change you as an investor? What can you do? Well, the catalyst for actually initiating my build was I got a bill invoice for the software I was using as being the organizer. And it didn't really fit my needs at all. So I said, I bet I can build this on my own and I can improve it for the experience for me and for my family. And so that was kind of the catalyst for why I picked what I did. Here's where I am. So it's called investmentlab.ai. It's on the web. I use Lovable as my build environment, Vercel, right, as the hosting. And so it's kind of fully operational. It's got build pipelines, et cetera. It's not a massive app, but over 53 engineering prompt sessions. There's now 12 tables. There's 54 features that include things like how do I create an investment experience? How do I manage it? How do I automate the performance tracking of that? The AI summaries and the rationale. And so you can see a little screenshot to the right in terms of what it does. It's also a multi-user, multi-role application. So, again, you have to be invited in, onboard you, be able to get set up, et cetera. So that's the app. Here was my operating model. So, the question, I started to think about how do I start building this? And the first thing I did was, Fred Brooks had a very kind of durable quote from his book in 1975, The Mythical Man Month. And he said, plan to throw one away because you will anyway. And that's a philosophy that I definitely took to heart as I started to do this. I started out with one AI agent paired up with Lovable. And I figured through that AI agent, I could get everything done that I wanted to get done in Lovable and not have to live in Lovable. I could write up specifications and it would help me write those specs and it would also help me get those loaded. Well, it doesn't turn out to be a very good way to do it. I spent about 2 weeks in that model. I found a lot of pitfalls. The engineering side of it didn't do a good job, for instance, on schema migration. So I had to kind of pull back and say, I need really not one agent that can hold all the context of all roles, but I need to have specialized functional roles for the product development process. So I kind of threw the work I had been doing away, which was okay. There was a learning, and kind of moved from there. And if anyone's wondering about the picture on here, that is the picture from the book. Here's my current operating model. Basically, it mentioned the build automation layer. That's run in Lovable. So that's kind of the AI side of it, of generating the code, managing GitHub, pushing the deployments to Vercel, et cetera. That's kind of handled all through Lovable. Now, there are times that I go around it and I go directly to GitHub and do some things like that. But for the most part, it goes right through the build automation layer. On top of that layer are 3 other layers of AI that I use. And this is done inside Claude chat projects. And there's probably a collective groan to say, why would you do that? Why not use Claude Code? I really wanted I wanted a lot of flexibility and I wanted a lot of observability. I'll kind of walk through why I made these choices. This is not a very scalable setup, and I'm not advocating it. I'm sharing it here only so you know kind of the approach I took and kind of why I took it. The AI functional roles, so those are all the various agents that perform product management or engineering, et cetera. Those AI functional roles, the instructions for them are created by the functional role architect, so the layer above. And that's where I've given the functional role architect kind of a product development process, rules of engagement, et cetera. And it builds then the functional roles from that. Above the functional role architect is the operating model architect. And that is the one that really sets up how the overall architecture works. How is data, how are deliverables created in terms of metadata? How is there information about tracing what the human does versus the AI does? Things along those lines are controlled there. So it informs the functional role architect, et cetera. So that's kind of the layers. Now, it could be done differently. So again, I'm not advocating this is the only way to do it. I found that this to be a very useful way of me being able to manage, especially the instructions over time of each of the AI functional roles. What I'll do is just to touch a little bit on key aspects of the model that I think translate to anybody else's operating model. The first is the whole notion of specialization. As I mentioned in my first model, I had one agent that was trying to do 3 or 4 different roles. In my model that I came up with, I had 8 different roles: product marketing. I actually had legal. There's some other roles that were in there. But if I was really doing a full go-to-market on this right away, I would want all of those various roles with their certain compliance, capabilities. For instance, I have a compliance one, given this is a kind of in a regulated market, financial markets, and what you can and cannot advise, and making sure that the product doesn't do that. So I use those lightly, but the key roles that I used were the product manager, engineer, and designer, as you can imagine, and making sure that the interaction and the flow between them matched what I needed to do in terms of defining a product, designing it, and then being able to build it. For the human AI collaboration, I needed a way to capture that. I needed to be able to figure out, if I want to measure what the human does versus the AI, I had to figure out exactly how could I capture that. And my approach, I decided to say each deliverable would have its own conversation inside a Claude project. And you can see that on the right-hand side. It's just a little screenshot. And I had some numbering conventions to make it easy for me to track things, and et cetera. But what you see there is, for instance, conceptual model. That's one conversation. So there's a one-to-one mapping. And I can look at the entire history of that conceptual model's versions, because they're all versioned in place. The lifecycle of that deliverable is within that conversation. And it's fully traceable. Every version of that contains an analysis of what I did versus what the AI did. So it can look over time and say, here was the total contribution you did, and here's the total contribution the AI did. And I did that for each of the various deliverables that I was responsible for from a product management standpoint. Now, I wanted traceability. Being a solopreneur, I'd have to sit down and figure out, okay, what got done yesterday and who needs to do what. And what I was able to do is build into the header, and this is what our operating model did, build into the header of every deliverable, what type, some information about what type it is, who produced it, what version level, the date, what conversation did it come from. All of that is in there to make the environment more manageable for me and to be able to get traceability back. Wait, where are we on this and what's going on? And so that was a key aspect for me to be able to kind of run this. The second, I had to say, well, how do I measure contribution? So I created an observability layer where at the end of each version of each deliverable, several things would happen. It would identify what type of work was done in the deliverable. So it might be, generating some content. There might be some framing that was done. There might have been some guidance on, what to do, what not to do. So there were different, it basically came up with 8 different things that I would do and about 9 things that the AI would do. And it would measure whether those existed in that deliverable and how that impacted it. So it would identify the work type. Then it would identify invisible contributions, maybe things that I decided that weren't asked for, and then they don't always show up as artifacts. So we kind of put that in there. It accounts for prior sessions. So not only does it say what I did in this session, but what's the cumulative, right? So when it calculates, it says, here's what you did in this session, but here's the cumulative. Now, the methodology I came up with is fairly arbitrary, right? But it gave a baseline. And it could always be improved. You learn from it and you figure out what you want to do. I did adjust it several times as I went through. So again, I'm not advocating that I got 100% correct, but it gave me a baseline that across deliverables, I could say, well, humans do more in this deliverable than they do in that deliverable. And that was really part of what I was looking for. The next thing I put in there was process flags. So how do you flag improvement at the end of each deliverable? And again, the AI would run this automatically. Think of it being able to do a retro every version you get. It would identify if there were missing inputs. Did we start the session with something that was missing and then I had to go back and get it and scrounge it up? Was there something that would have been more helpful, that would have expedited the process if we had included it? And those are some of the recommended inputs. They weren't necessarily missing, they weren't required, but they would be helpful. Then there were collaboration opportunities. Where were there things maybe that I did not provide enough specificity when I prompted it? And where were there things that it made assumptions that it shouldn't do? And then I would be able to improve that. And the final thing it would do is actually create prompt improvement instructions. So remember that functional architect, the functional role would say, here's a list of updates that the functional architect should do and give back to me. So it's a way of kind of self-improving the overall process. It's not like I had to sit down and write it. It would do the analysis, generate what needs to be done, and then go back into it. Then the final thing was routing briefs. There's a set of kind of deliverables that are really one-time use. So they're used within the conversation. All the context for each agent I was managing through the project files. But if the context was only required for that conversation or that one deliverable, that's where the routing brief, so the PM agent could give a routing brief to the engineering agent and it would give additional context for that one deliverable. And so we had a kind of process to make that work. And that really was in there. Now, as I mentioned, my architecture of cloud projects and Lovable is clearly not maybe the most scalable, et cetera. But what I would advocate, and really say is important is the concepts that I implemented are applicable in if you're trying to do an operating model. Specialization, how you capture the collaboration, traceability, observability, improvement, and being able to define workflow. Those are all things that should be proactively designed and enhanced as you learn them. So here is the human AI product management boundary. So most of my time was spent because I'm a product manager. I can't, I could have gone into the engineering side a little deeper, but I don't think based on my lack of coding over the last 10, 15 years, that would be a useful thing. But I did have a thought process. I tried to think for myself, if I was hiring a PM to join me on this, what would the new job definition look like? What do they need to be able to do that they hadn't done in the past, maybe? And what I thought was interesting is when AI absorbs the execution, the creation of a jobs to be done matrix, what is the human supposed to do? Well, their contribution doesn't shrink, it really concentrates down. And here are the areas that it concentrates on. One is judgment. And I think the number one thing from a product perspective is what problem are you going to go solve? Problem selection is really probably the single most important decision. And here's at one point in building investment labs, I asked the AI product manager a direct question, which was, what can you actually originate and what can't you? And I'm just going to read the answer it came back with because I thought it was pretty honest and it really reinforced my belief on this. It came back and it said, the investing playbook system, the lab model, the user architecture, none of these come from me. I structured them. I made them precise. I stress tested them. I did not originate them. And it goes on about the boundary question. I can originate within a defined problem space, combinations, implications, risks, structures that weren't explicitly provided. I cannot originate the problem space itself. I cannot look at the market, feel the gap, and decide it's worth solving. Not once did I introduce a product concept, a user insight, or a strategic frame that the subsequent work built on. Every frame I worked within came from you first. And I think that's probably, I couldn't have said it better, but that's what the judgment that a PM protects is time and money and organization. Now, here's where AI and building prototypes and everything else, how do you validate it's the right problem? Hey, building a prototype very quickly using AI, awesome. Like, yes, please do that. But at the end of the day, and by the way, that's one individual's time working to validate that, figured out. When you make a commitment to truly build a production system, that's committing more than just the engineering and the PMs. It's committing the org to a go-to-market. It's committing to an opportunity to solve a different problem. That's a huge choice. And that judgment and the accountability for that judgment sits on the PM to get that done. The second is empathy. And, empathy, a lot of times people talk about empathy and problem selection, which is important. Where's the user pain, et cetera. But there's also empathy in product design. What is the solution you're really going to create? And it's another one where I gave the AI this task. I had set up the problem statement. The problem statement was very rich. It had a whole bunch of background. It talked about the market, et cetera. And I also gave it a North Star metric. And I was feeling a little bit lazy. And I asked it, I said, give me the user segmentation for this. And the came back with was technically competent, I would say. It had different psychological profiles of people. It talked about logical, groupings and why you would want to do it that way. And I was looking at it, I was reading it, and it just reminded me, it was so cookie cutter. It just reminded me of a human PM who's actually never talked to a user. And what I could tell is the AI has no scar tissue. It just has no way to understand this stuff at all. And that's when I really thought about using it, it's going to create a product that's completely unrelatable. And there's no way the AI can give the empathy with, even if it's inferring it off a whole bunch of stuff that was come through the support line, through the product feedback, all of it. It's never going to get there, because to truly understand not the high level pain, but the kind of the emotive pain, if you will, of the user, you kind of have to talk to them, listen to them, and see how they react. Same with buyer pain. What goals does a user really have? Where do they want to ride? What's their motivation? You don't get any of that from the feedback, the product feedback link inside the product. You have to be able to sit down with them. It's that proximity and talking with them that gets you the answer. Creativity was then kind of this other really key aspect, because at some point you have to define precisely what are we going to build. And with Investment Lab, the idea is, how do I take, for instance, an organizer who wants to be able to invest in their friends or their family to help them become better investors? How do you get those people to make it relatable and something they can do, and not feel intimidated by it? And what I noticed is I had lazily allowed AI to do some definition for me. And it started to specify in the conceptual model language that was more like an analyst. So like the primary object was a thesis of an investment. The completed, if you will, position was you're going to do a post-mortem. The accumulated, set of rules was going to become a framework. That's not very approachable for a lot of people, right? It sounds too academic, or it's too advanced. And so every one of those words was pretty accurate, but every one was wrong. And what I needed to do was spend more time in definition and creatively coming up with that. Now, every product has a conceptual model. Whether you build it deliberately or you don't, it has a complete description. There isn't a complete description somewhere of how the solution works. And the conceptual model has to do it in a language that's precise enough that everyone involved in the building and the using of the product can operate from the same understanding. One conceptual understanding between the builders and the users. When that model's really strong, everyone derives their work from it, and you get a great deliverable. When it's weak, guess what? Everybody fills in the gaps. And engineers name something different than product management, than design, and everything goes off whack. And in the old world, you could kind of resolve that over time. But in the AI world, it just absolutely executes, and just you're producing stuff that you're going to either have to rewire or redo, et cetera. And it does it confidently. It doesn't tell you that it's not doing it correctly. So creativity is really the key to defining a product that users are going to love and recommend, that's going to compound into growth and really drive economic return. The final thing is really around domain expertise. Domain expertise is critical in many ways, because if the human is weak in context, they don't have the context, they can't make the AI strong in context. So the AI will be weak because the human judgment is really a preference, and it doesn't guide the AI to a better answer. The empathy is generic. It's that PM who's never met the user. The creativity is abstract because they really don't understand the space well, and they can't figure out the right way to convey that. And that is probably one of the key things that is now becoming apparent, that is a fundamental requirement. And there's only really 3 ways you can get domain expertise. Founder market fit, that's what I've got for investmentlab.ai. Sustained work in the role. You could have worked for a company or in an industry that you learned all about the role, even though you didn't do that particular role. You saw it, you understand it, and everything else. Or accelerated study. You can still use all the tools today and everything else, but you've got to really invest yourself. You've got to be dedicated to becoming an expert, and learning all of those kinds of things. So those are really the areas that I found were kind of the boundary points and where the human adds value. So from there, what I tried to do is take a look at all the deliverables and start to understand what does the human do per deliverable, what does the AI do on a deliverable by deliverable basis, and then create a map for that, because that would ultimately inform the AI role definition and the human role definition. And these are the things that the 10 deliverables that I had worked on and what the splits are. Again, the idea is to look at the sort of the relative weights between them, not the absolute numbers. I have a set that I call foundation deliverables. Those are things that were worked on and everything else to set the context for the build materials. And so that's your problem statement, your user segmentation, what's the definition of success, what's the North Star for the users. All of that was sort of put in place. And you can see the difference between foundation deliverables and build deliverables is the fact that foundation deliverables had a higher human component, which you would expect, because that's really the frame setting for what's to be built. And then on the build materials, some of them, like journey maps, that was heavily AI, because you can just give it a little bit of guidance if you've done your jobs to be done matrix well and your learning loop definition. I mean, there's things where you realize that. But you'll notice in the build deliverables, the conceptual model was still one of the highest items. So that's where my time went in to adjusting and framing and controlling what the AI was actually building. If you look at these responsibilities split between the two, AI, we went through what the humans do, what AI was really good at was all the document creation. So when you think of creating a product brief, it's amazing, how much time it saves you doing that. And if you need to make adjustments, you just say, make this tweak, do this kind of thing, add in X, Y, and Z. Awesome. And updates as well. It was really good at doing gap analysis. It could find things. Hey, you didn't think about these other items. You need to put those in. Great. I had very explicit instructions to challenge me on what it thought might be missing content or inconsistencies, and it would surface those in ways, at times where I thought it was painful, but it was really good that it would do that, and it made everything that I was building better. It was also awesome, when you do the build on the engineering side and you make it change as a result of like doing some testing, all the updates that go into all the documents to make sure that everything is correct. Awesome. And then things like version management routing. So when we talk about automating the craft, everything from building these deliverables to maintaining them and keeping them up to date and keeping things synchronized, it's awesome at being able to do that. Here's how I would reframe PM qualifications. So if I was hiring a PM today, these are the minimum qualifications that I would look for. First of all, in domain expertise, you've got to have one of those items: founder market fit, sustained work, or even showing up to the interview and the discussion. You better have already learned a ton and explain why you could learn more and how you could be productive in that, because otherwise everything else is a fail. I'd also want to see a track record of what problems did you select in the past? How did you earn commitment on those? And what return did you get from it? If you couldn't explain those, then I'm not sure you're going to be able to do that in the future. Now, everybody can be trained, etc. But I'm looking for somebody to come in with these qualifications, not to do on-the-job training. Empathy acquisition. Have you worked with a research team before? If you haven't worked with the research team, have you done research? What was that? And how did it look, etc.? So that ability to explain what you learned from doing that. I'd want to see, okay, lay out even at a high level, lay out a conceptual model of a product, or give me a high level definition of what you've built in the past and how that survived contact with the users. And it's important to understand, how did you validate that definition, and it could be through, prototypes and all kinds of things. So, use with AI tools is definitely important. But then increasingly, instruction authorship, how you're going to, as a PM, you are now going to manage an AI PM, literally manage an AI PM. How will you handle managing that system prompt and the role definitions and what it does, et cetera? Those are things that I would expect that a PM coming in would know how to be able to do. There's also obviously things like, what tools have you used, et cetera. There's some other tactical things, but these are the items that will define whether or not they're going to be successful in their job. So just getting to the kind of the final section here about organizational design.
Hey, Matt,
As I mentioned,
was it okay to break in with a question, or do you want to
oh,
wait till the end?
absolutely.
Could you go back to the previous slide? I was curious. I'll turn my video here. I was curious about this, and outside of the instruction authorship, has the before large language models, AI, would anything be different for if you were hiring a PM?
Yeah, a lot of it gets into um, when I looked at it, a lot of people would say, how can you actually write these product briefs? How do you manage product board?
Mm.
There's a bunch of things like backlog management. I'm really good at that, and grooming a backlog, and I know how to do that. And that becomes so mundane and so easy with AI. You don't, yes, that still exists. But as an example, I don't see using a product management tool going forward. I don't think you need AHA or product board at all. At least I haven't. And I can manage, and the backlog is so dynamic because it's every day.
Mm.
And you don't do. Everybody says, "Oh, well, 2 week sprint." You don't need a 2 week sprint. The daily stand up becomes the demo review. Like, what did you build yesterday? Yeah,
But yeah, and that makes sense too. But if you looked at domain expertise through definitional precision, it seems like those have been the requirements for a product manager. I think your career and my career go back the same length.
yeah,
It seemed like it's been there. Has AI changed any of those top four?
yeah. Because I believe. Well, no, you and I would agree they haven't changed. So I believe these four things forever. So they're not new to me.
Mm.
What I've seen in especially large organizations is they get hidden behind the operational
Ah,
skills. And so the number of people that
yeah,
I've seen in product management roles who have no domain experience over what they're doing is high. The
I see.
number of people that I've seen, say, "Oh, well, I'm going to let the engineers come up with the conceptual model." And like
Mm.
the engineers don't even ask for or demand the conceptual model is high, right? So I have always believed in these four. I just think they're inescapable now.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying. It's kind of sometimes you see the product owner in Scrum, which was never really meant to be a position. It was meant to be a
Right.
role. And yes, many of those things, certainly between 2012 and 21, I see what you're saying. It's so
Yeah.
the top four are that's really the core of what it always was. Some of the operational kinds of things start fading into the background, and
Right.
instruction authorship becomes kind of the definitely a new one. Okay,
Yeah.
that's super useful. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Good question. So we've all seen this quote before, and most people attribute it to, oh, the values of an organization. Um, I think the important thing to think about, it was originally written to mean this: a strategy cannot succeed if the organization is not structurally designed to support it. And that's what becomes critical with the AI. Did you design, the organization for human AI success? Did you figure out who does the work? What are the roles, responsibilities, reporting structures, teams, org chart that includes AI, by the way, with the salary, like, the salary that is on that AI component. And then how's the work managed? What are the process decisions, the tools, like the tooling has to change, the system. It's a lift to get ready for truly an AI native operating model, and how success is measured. Now, there's going to be a lot of organizational designs that come about, and this is kind of one of the cool things. So I'm doing the solopreneur, right? I'm the one over on the left. I'm the founder, and I've got all my uh, AI functional roles underneath me. Um, and then you've got the team on the right that's maybe more kind of a different team. And if the two of us were competing, as an example, the team on the right might do better because, like, as I'm managing my design functional role, I'm not a designer by background, and it's doing okay. Like, I am not excited. I would love a designer on my team that I could really have it own that functional role and do a good job. Same with engineering. I know enough about engineering to make it work, but I know that, like, optimizing the architecture and coming up with certain things, there's going to be design patterns and engineering patterns that really functional specialists would know better. And that's why I think you'll start to see these evolutions of different teams. And there can be many, many different combinations. It's also one way that you can evolve over time. One of the amazing things as a founder, you can start a company and build an app and get going, and make it viable and then hire the team around it. Whereas in the past, a lot of times you had to hire the team and build the MVP and all that. So it allows for different evolution. It allows for different, kind of build patterns, et cetera. And I think we'll see lots of variance over time. And it really depends, again, on your team, your problem in the moment. So there's really no single right answer. And divergence is, of performance of these different teams is really inevitable. You can start with two teams from in different companies, and they start out with the same AI architecture models. They even have the same operating model that they're built on. And in a year's time, they're going to be two completely different organizations, right? So they could have started out thinking about the same problem, but the humans in company A are evolving the the models. They have different judgment. They have different kind of decisions and creativity than the ones on the right in company B, and they're going to be changing their instructions differently. So when you think about that, the instructions really become this conduit of human differentiation, and humans are still going to be the reason that a company wins. And it's just how you enable those humans to really dominate what they're doing that matters, and how you empower them by giving them an AI operating model that outperforms, other AI operating models. And that's, I'm still a, a real believer in this notion of long-term value is built on differentiation. And the only constant is that humans are going to generate the profit. They're the ones that have the judgment, the creativity, everything else. And durable companies really don't compete harder. They become different than the competition. And the reason is every book over the last 40 years has pointed to that. From Marketing Warfare, which says go own a niche that you can defend, Crossing the Chasm, which was, get your vertical, Blue Ocean that says don't go fight the competition in the red ocean, go to the open water in the blue ocean. 0 to 1, be a monopoly, competitions for losers. Play bigger, create your own category and dominate it. That's the message, right? And it only gets done when it's done through humans. And that's kind of my number one takeaway at the end of this, is why organizational design is so important. So just quickly close. We talked about the takeaways. I won't repeat those, but hopefully that came through. My only final thoughts is this: invest in yourself. You can't know what you've never learned, no matter how smart you are. So, go do, if you haven't done this, go do it. Um, Push back, be a champion for change. If you see rituals built for a different era, like the bi-weekly sprint, challenge yourselves. Why are we doing this? Make sure that you're going to throw one away, and domain expertise wins. So open it up for questions. Hopefully that was helpful.
That was great, Matt. Thank you so much. Great insights. Great
Yep.
references. Michelle?
Hey, if you don't mind, since actually, you know what? I'm gonna wait for Huna to go ahead and start this off. Can we unmute him? Let's see.
Oh, uh, I might have locked it. I'm sorry. Oh no. Where's Una? Oh, right there. Una, I don't think you're muted, so
Oh, okay. Sorry. I was
yeah, you're
just,
good.
I mean, just waiting in the line. I don't want to jump in.
Oh, you're good.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. This is such a great topic. I mean, loved every bit of it. I mean, I have done agile transformations myself uh, for Verizon, right? Scaled agile transformations. Um, yeah, the topic is very close to my heart. Um, my question to you, Matt, is basically how do you structure teams at scale, right? I know, like you said it in the team formation and the operating model structure that you're um, outlining, right? But how do you structure at scale and make it a AI native for that? I mean, if you refer, I mean, the reason I'm referring to the scaled agile was, so it is not just one team, right, who's delivering the work,
Right.
but a combination of teams when they are coming together to deliver a value. How to think about it, right? Is what I mean. No guidance from scaled agile as well. I mean, scaled agile framework as well. I mean, that clear guidance of how do you structure it. But what are your thoughts on it?
Well, organizational change is difficult. There's no getting around that, and each organization has its own culture of how they do transformation and change. So I'm not sure I would have a single answer. My default answer, and what I still sort of believe in, is start small, right? So start somewhere that you can kind of cordon it off and give it a chance for success and let it run a natural learning cycle. Um, you know, you got to be able to run fast. You got to be able to run unbridled. You've got to be being able to break things. So you probably have a SWAT group or anything else. I know what Concur did. So you got to imagine they were a public company with on-prem software. Their whole business model was built around this. And they created a Tiger team that was supposed to go out and build a SaaS version of it. And they did. And they just made sure that they were safe and that they could get it built. And you can imagine the political infightings I'm sure they had, but that's how they did it. But every organization is different. You've got to figure out how you build and learn as a result of building.
I gotcha. So yeah, I was referring to more of a enterprise scale applications or solutions or services, right? I mean, they are already operating in a traditional structure of delivering value, right? So I mean, the component that you mentioned about the DSU daily stand up is like more of a, okay, what you have done yesterday, and then what you are going to be doing today to advance to the goals that you're having to have tomorrow, right? That questioning is changed,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what you're demoing today is what the team is doing right now, rather than like, okay, you're not planning for that sprint cycle, whether you're on 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 schedule to deliver the value that we committed for the sprint, right? I mean, that
Well,
that kind of shifted, right? The integration
yeah.
points are a lot more frequent now, right?
Well, I think you would have to figure out what is your build capability that would allow you to ship every single day. So you'd have to solve for that first, right? That says the
Mm.
engineering team has built an AI infrastructure that can support the ability for, prompts to be generated and new functionality to be deployed, tested, and released every single day. So that becomes a fundamental, building block. If that doesn't exist, then you're correct. It wouldn't be possible to do.
Yeah, I mean, we are not staying at the team level anymore, right? I mean, when we are doing the
Right.
DSU, right, daily stand up, right, like we are doing it the entire scaled teams, right? At the organization level, at the daily
But
level. So
but
that's
even
that's the yeah.
but even within the in a enterprise section, you're still going to have teams that own certain pieces of an app and everything else. So you would decompose it. And you can have
Mm,
that decomposition. So I can't solve it directly, but I think that's how you'd have to think through it is what
yeah,
is the
yeah.
decomposition of the things that I have? How have I enabled the teams to have an immediate build pipeline? And then the dev and test environments and everything else that allow them to push it, very, very quickly.
Agile, yeah, because like the system demos are only happening at a sprint level, right? Once in a
Right.
sprint level, or maybe twice, right? Now it is like brought down to single day, and then basically that the whole cadence is changed, swapped. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's the yeah. All right, thank you, Matt. Great
Yep.
topic.
You bet. Good question.
Vishal, did you have something? Because I know we're
Yeah,
getting
I
closer
was
to
trying to
time
raise
here.
my hand and I ended up clapping instead. Sorry.
You can clap for Vuna. That's all right.
No, thank you. No, I actually want to pause and wait to see if anyone else had a question or comment before I ask mine.
I don't see any hands.
Matt, the other Matt,
Mhm.
question I had was, I'm assuming you've kind of thought through this and seen this as well. The way I see this is, simplest way I can think about it is AI is going to make things move really, really fast. So if I'd establish a North Star for my product today, a week later, things may have completely shifted. And so I think the number one thing would be, as an organization, to the previous question, would be how do you create nimbleness within the organization without creating a bunch of chaos? Um, is that a fair, like, especially if I'm thinking at scale?
Yep. Yeah, it's a great question. So the way I interpreted your question is how do you make sure that, for instance, PMs are not trigger happy? They go, oh, I got an idea. Like, here, let's go build this, right? And then everybody runs, they build it because the AI can build it for cheap and everything else, only to find out the next week the PM says, oh, no, I'm just kidding. What we learned is blank, 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 and we now got to go here. And they don't feel responsible because they say, hey, the AI can just regenerate this easily. And you're like, no, it's actually not quite that easy right now. So I think it is about making sure that you still have quality going in, and you should expect that you'll continue to tweak. You're not going to get it right up front. You're going to learn as you go. Um, but there's a tendency that I've seen as people talk about it is that you don't really have to spend enough time on your homework. You can just put something out there and see if it works.
And it's also, I think, especially with the agile mindset, right? Where you want to learn by doing. You can easily put stuff out there and hope that. So now it's chaotic for the customer, chaotic for your team. The
Yep.
other thing, though, the reason I think some of it is valid and legitimate might be the fact that if you see the pace of competitors, they're going to be starting to put stuff out there really, really fast. Honestly, I can't imagine if I was at Anthropic or Google or whatever right now when everybody's shipping new features and
Right.
capabilities every day, how do you even keep up?
Well, there's different scenarios. So if you're a startup or a smaller organization, you don't have a huge body of people to experiment against. If you're Anthropic or OpenAI, you can create a cohort, run an experiment, in that cohort, which is amazing, and not impact your whole user base much more easily than you could if you've got 1,000 users, right? So there's different techniques for discovery and testing and validation, and I'm not trying to cover all of those, but I think you're right. Smart competitors are going to figure out, oh, look, I'm just going to ship it, but I'm going to test it against a small cohort and see what happens.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any final questions? We're a little bit over time.
Yeah, we're over time.
Thank you, Matt, for sticking
I
out.
did have one other question, if it's
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Matt.
Take us home, Michelle.
You had that slide about responsibilities and how much of the work did you do versus how much the AI did, right? So it's 45,
Yeah.
55, roughly something like that. The other interesting question I would have, though, is typically, right, if you had done all of it yourself, let's say, as a product manager, if it would have taken you 3 months, did this shorten the process significantly more in terms of time So even though you had 45% of the responsibility and AI did 55, but it moves really fast. So
Yep.
did that basically shorten your timeline from maybe a 3-month timeline to, 15 days or something like that? I'm just wondering if you had any metrics.
It totally accelerated it. But it's hard for me to quantify because again, I'm doing a founder market fit and I'm not doing some validation work that I would normally do. There's parts that I'm shortcutting as a result of building it for myself. But with what you said, absolutely. I mean it is kind of magical to hit a button and just give it some guidance and you're like, oh my gosh, like I just saved so much freaking time. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Matt, is that presentation had a lot of really valuable content in it. Can you share that? Is that public?
Yeah, no, I'll email it to you.
Okay.
Happy to have it shared. There's no proprietary thing.
Okay.
I did it as an experiment on my own, but wanted to share it broadly. So happy to
Yeah.
do that.
I really like that model, how you were thinking about all the different agents. Vishal was just mentioning it's just like I think a lot about capacity and how much you spend time on and the value. And it's a great sort of engineering way of thinking about the time you spend in
Uh,
project management. So
Honestly, if you give it a scope of work and a salary, you can decide whether or not it's worth it.
exactly. The token
Yeah,
token maxing. Okay, cool.
yeah.
And this chat won't have be persistent for everybody that's here today. But if you're interested in Matt's presentation, we'd love to have you on our Agile Austin Slack. Just reach out to me. I'm matt.roberts@agileaustin.org. Happy to connect you in our Slack if you like this. We'll also have the recording of this on YouTube, and I'll put the link there. So that'll be everything in the next week or so. But Matt, thank you so much for sharing all your insight today, from enterprise to solopreneur, with agentic AI buds that are helping you out. So it's really great to have you here today. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the invite.
Thanks, all.
All right, and we'll see everybody in June on the fourth Friday of June with Ash. And with that, hope you all have a really great weekend. Oh, and I'll get you Sridhar.
Great.
And if anyone's interested in signing up for July, if you have a topic that you've been thinking about,